Stoicism has affected the way that I live my life and improved it immeasurably, I would say, because gosh, I remember when I was a young guy, I was going to say kind of miserable. I was quite an angry young man, I think. Had a kind of tough time as a teenager, and I often think that I'm much happier now than I ever was in the past. And I think Stoicism is part of the reason for that. Over time, over several decades, I think Stoicism has just given me a much better way of coping with stress. It's helped me to become more psychologically resilient. And also think Stoicism gave me more of a kind of sense of purpose, a moral compass and a sense of direction in life, which is really important. And so by becoming more immersed in the philosophy, I think I found a way to make my life more rewarding and more fulfilling.
Oh gosh. Well, when I look at myself 5 years ago and then see where I am today, I can see that I've come so far, even though, of course, I have much further to go, nowhere near where I'd like to be ultimately. But there's just no comparison. I mean, as far as happiness, contentment with my life, being more in control of myself, my emotions, my reactions, not just being pulled around every which way, but really intentionally living the way I want to live. Stoicism has just helped me turn my life around completely.
I believe that Stoicism has had a profound impact on my life. When I was in my late 20s, I was diagnosed with a very rare, incurable, degenerative illness called sarcoidosis of the central nervous system. And my life as an actor, as a model, where it was really about the outside, was, pivoted because I wasn't well enough to be on set. And also, chemo and steroids are no beauty treatment. So, what was really interesting was getting a diagnosis of sarcoidosis, where I live with complex regional pain syndrome. It's really taught me that we can't control what happens. We can only control how we respond. And I'm just trying to make the most out of every single day.
Well, you'd have to ask those around me as to whether it had improved me. I think the dichotomy of control, I find that useful. I certainly, by temperament, would say I'm probably something of a worrier. So being able to think about, is this under my control? If not, let it go. If it is, do something about it. I found personally useful. Probably more, though, more useful for me has been the virtues, the idea of looking at things through the virtues lens, through the lens of the virtues. What virtue do I need in this situation? I think that is really, really helpful for me and for others. And I can actually give a little example from this week. So there I was going for a nice walk. Well, I drove my car a little bit away from here so I could go for a nice walk. And I was thinking about Stoicism, and I was really serene and calm. And I come back, and as I did, there was a young lady who I didn't know, and she was hanging around my car, and she had a little bit of paper on it. And she said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I've just bashed into your car." And I looked, and there was this broken glass and everything. And she was writing her details on the card because she'd just crashed into a parked car. There was no one there. No one witnessed it. And she didn't know that I was coming back. So she was virtuous, and that was nice for me. But also, I think, it's not that I thought, oh, I'm going to be stoic about this and be virtuous. But automatically, I just kind of said to her, thank you for being so honest, rather than being cross with her for bumping into my car. So I think that's just a nice little example of how, in these minor problems we have in life, people using the virtues, being virtuous, is actually a rather positive thing.
Stoicism is part of the general practice, I guess, I've always had of being reflective. I'm not much of a diary writer these days, but I certainly was early on. I think of it often in terms of virtue, being good, and what's required of a person who has integrity and isn't just out for herself, but really is thinking about the common good and the commonwealth and what's required to mutually support each other, both for our own healthy and moral ways of living, but to be in it together, whether it's in a climate disaster and set of crises that we're currently in, or a pandemic, or political fractiousness, or more. So I think it's often with me in terms of thinking about good character.
Well, it's a difficult one, obviously, because there are many things that I could possibly say. But I mean, a couple of things perhaps are important. I mean, one is Stoicism has made me think about a certain number of topics in a different way. So it's about thinking. I mean, the way I think about certain issues. I mean, I mentioned their approach to character, their approach to emotions. Okay, the idea that we shouldn't go for some sort of instinctive response to situation and circumstances, but always try to mediate our ideas and consider things more carefully, look closer. In a way, it could be a slogan that is stoic in character. So I think Stoicism has given me a more balanced and sort of mediated approach to things, emotionally speaking. This is true of other ancient schools of philosophy, but I would say it's particularly in Stoicism that we find this approach to management and building of your character. So this has had an influence on me, I suppose, greatly. I mean, insofar as Stoicism presents a different approach to problems, different from many contemporary approach. I think is also therapeutic in many ways. I mean, it helps you to go about life in a healthier and more satisfying, I would say, way. That has been Stoicism for me and for my life. But the good thing about it is that many people may draw different things from that. I think the things that were important for me are quite common in a way, but there are other aspects as well. Yeah.
I think the biggest impact that Stoicism has had on my own life is putting things into a bigger context. So putting immediate little frustrations, worries, concerns into that much larger picture that the Stoics recommend we do. And I think that's been a really helpful way to deal with difficulties and obstacles as they've come along.
I think Stoicism has a huge impact on my life because I think it gives me agency in situations where I might have felt very powerless, or I might have felt overwhelmed by life's circumstances, particularly as someone who lives with disability, and where so much of that is outside of my control. And I sometimes feel, well, I always feel very fortunate that I have that. I met someone a while ago who has one of the same diseases as me, and he had spent his whole life trying to get a cure for it. It's not curable. And he was trying to control something that was definitely outside of his condition. I think he was really unhappy. You know, he wasn't able to have joy. And so I do feel really fortunate. It's not because I'm better than him, it's because I was fortunate enough to come across these ideas. So it gives me freedom. It gives me choices in how I respond to life. And that is a very, very precious gift.
Stoicism has definitely improved my life in a number of ways. For one thing, I'm far more calm than I used to be. I used to be a little bit anxious, and sometimes I would get upset or angry about things. And of course, I'm a human being, I'm not a sage, so I still do that occasionally, but far less than before. That means that my relationships with other people, with my wife, with my daughter, with my friends, have definitely improved from that perspective. And I know this not just because I feel it internally, but because people literally told me over the last several years that, hey, this is far more pleasant, this is far more constructive, and so on. So yes, Stoicism has definitely changed my day-to-day life, especially with the people that I love.
It's given me, in a word, inner stability. Not to be confused with a kind of flatness, but because of the discernment that I seek to practice every day, I feel like I see my life much more clearly than I did as a much younger person. And so I feel like I go through my days in an ordered and graceful way. I feel, I hope this doesn't sound self-aggrandizing. I'm really just doing a comparison of, before Stoicism self, after Stoicism self. And yeah, I feel a sort of poise amid the chaos. And that's, I certainly enjoy the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs, and I'm all for passion. But there's something about not having your ship sunk, every time something disturbing happens. And so that I consider that a great gift of the philosophy. It does, of course, have to be practiced. I mean, if you just read the words on a page, it doesn't do much for you.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think probably I've always had a rather reflective approach to life, or at least, I don't know about always, perhaps for a long time. And Stoicism has kind of merged with that, I think. So it isn't, as it were, that I discovered Stoicism and then my character and attitudes changed. It's more a kind of dialogue, if you like, between the way I live and try to live and Stoic ideals and principles. But there have been some specific ways Stoicism has been helpful to me. Just over 10 years ago, my wife died. She was 12 years younger than me, and that was quite a blow. And I think Stoicism was helpful to me then. I asked myself, well, here you are doing all this ancient philosophy and studying something that's supposed to give you life guidance. Can it help you in this situation, which is just the kind of situation, of course, that Stoicism talks a lot about, coping with death, other people's death, your own death. So I think that was helpful to me.
It has affected me. It has affected the way I think, at least. So I'm much more conscious about how I value things, how I draw conclusions. what I consider to be important. And it just also gave me a bunch of friends. It just motivated me to study philosophy and get in touch with people from all over the world. So it's been great.
I think probably the biggest aspect is not necessarily mood regulation, although it somewhat helps with that. And that's what a lot of people go to Stoicism for, to feel better. I would say it sort of helped me with that, but not a whole lot. I would say more it has taught me to try to do good things for other people, despite not feeling good sometimes. And that can be anything mundane from paying attention to a family member who is talking about something that may not interest me, but quickly reminding myself my role right now is to be a family member. I'm here to meet them and to sympathize and socialize with them. So let me pay attention to them instead of thinking about the football game or whatever. And it also helps keep me on track in terms of, you know, the day-to-day kind of work that I have to do. Like when I'm sitting down to do work, I've taken on the role of a worker. And so therefore Twitter scrolling is not necessarily in the job description of most workers, unless you're a social media maven, which I'm not. So yeah, I would probably say it helps me try to fulfill my roles in life better. And this idea of roles is something that you see come up quite a bit throughout the history of Stoicism, with a strong emphasis in the slave turned Stoic teacher Epictetus's philosophy as well.
Stoicism has really helped me learn how to pay attention to what is real, and to sort of see through any narratives that I create in my head about interactions or relationships or work that might confuse or confound me or frustrate me. So Stoicism really helps me pay attention to myself, my purpose, my duty, what I should be doing, helps me avoid distraction. And it's also made me much more compassionate. So I see myself now as just another human being on this planet, and I see my role. I've been born and I appear here to in the role of a human being, and by nature that means being a social being. So it's not only about me. I've often previously lived a very protagonistic life where I've kind of thought that everything revolved around me and everything meant something to me. Stoicism has helped me kind of pull myself out of myself and see myself within the context of a much broader, much more human perspective. And that makes my life simpler and less complicated.
I would say that the example that I had given before about me feeling as though I had very little control over what I was feeling or why I was feeling it or what I could do about it, like being able to construct in my own mind a series of steps that I can take in order to improve myself, was something that was unclear to me. Now I have the frame of mind that if I do make a misstep somewhere and applying the philosophy correctly, it doesn't mean that the effort wasn't worth it or that I wouldn't be able to kind of pick myself back up and attempt again. A big tenet of Stoicism is understanding that because even though you have these building blocks to think this way, and to frame things that are happening around you and to you in this way, you're not born with the knowledge to apply it right off the bat. You have to shape it through habit and application. And having had experienced some pretty robustly difficult situations from that time in college and beyond to date, when very difficult or weird or complex or tough situations happen, I'm not immediately compromised, which is substantially different than what I would have experienced in myself years ago before I took up the practice.
Greatly.
I wouldn't be the person I am today if it hadn't been for Stoicism. As I said before, Stoicism served as in a way, a platform or a paradigm for me on which I reorganized and recalibrated my my life, and all the progress and all the personal and professional achievement that I have managed to achieve, so to speak, was in a way grounded in Stoicism. I wouldn't be able to I wouldn't be that in a way resilient. I wouldn't be that prolific in writing and in other things if it hadn't been for Stoicism. So it helped me a great deal, and it kind of shaped my identity today, which doesn't mean that I'm a 100% Stoic. As I mentioned, what I propound is reformed Stoicism. So I'm not kind of clinging, and I'm not shooting at any sort of Stoic orthodoxy, but rather a way of kind of flexibly using Stoicism and adjusting it to fit it my own life.
So I used to fear death, right? And when you don't fear death, your life gets remarkably better, because you think, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? So when you don't fear death, you don't fear losing your job in the same way. Of course, you have commitments, but you say, okay, but if it's not in my control, then I can only do what I can do today. If I do what's appropriate today, then tomorrow will look after itself. That's one aspect. Another aspect that Stoicism is involved in my life and improved is the friendships that I've been able to have. For example, friends with Sadler, and being learning from him, and Aldo, and speaking in English and Portuguese. And I'm increasingly speaking to, say, Mexican Stoics and Spanish. And it's a wonderful opportunity to speak across the world and have all these people. This is one of the wonderful thing about Stoicon, is that you're bringing together literally people from all over the world to talk about virtue, and why virtue is the root of a communitarian society and vision. Perhaps not a utopia, but certainly a better world than the one that we've been living in so far.
Before I studied Stoicism, death, for example, seemed to me something outside life, right? Something different or strange for life. But now we understand that it's a part of life, and you don't have any, you don't need to fear it, because actually it is it's freedom for us in ultimate analysis. As Epictetus says, the door is always open to us, and it shows to us the urgency of living our life in a communitarian way. It shows to us that Stoicism shows to us that we are part of a great web, a great network, which is God itself, and we must act accordingly. And it's a very good sensation. It's a very good, we have immediate, not immediate, sorry. We have a reward by thinking this way. Right.
Yeah, again, I'm fortunate to discover the Stoics almost 40 years ago, and they've really impacted my life in all kinds of ways. One story I tell early on is in my late teens, early 20s, when I became immersed in them, is that I had always been by nature very, very shy. Painfully shy, and I had an absolute total dread of public speaking. If I was assigned a course in college and we had to do a talk near the end of the semester, I kind of calculated the odds that I wonder if the teacher might get sick, or for some reason the course is canceled or something, so I wouldn't have to do that. But actually it was through reading the modern cognitive therapists and the Stoics, learning techniques like they call it premeditatio malorum, like thinking ahead. What if all these horrible things happen? What if I totally mess up? What if it's a total flop? Then I thought, well, maybe I would be the world's worst public speaker. But so what? Someone has to be, so it might as well be me. I'm getting these kind of ideas that we can cope with what seems to be adversity if we focus really more on the task at hand. So I remember one particular talk I got up, I had to do this talk, and I just told the audience up front, I'm sorry if you can see me turning beet red, if you can hear me, stuttering and stammering, if you can see my heart pounding within my chest, that's just the way I am. And then I wanted to get on with the talk. So basically from that point on, I just focused on the task at hand and not worried so much about whether I flop or what people might think of me. And of course, as the years went by, I found that Epictetus specifically talked about this himself in the discourses, saying that some people are grand public speakers or grand musicians, but you put them in front of an audience and all of a sudden they falter because their focus is no longer on the task at hand by what others think of them. The Stoics can be so powerful in helping us not worry so much about what others think of us. So anyway, that was a lesson I learned early on, but through the rest of my life, they helped me in my work life by never becoming overly upset when there were difficulties at hand, by helping me deal with people who were more volatile in their moods, people who tended to get angry easily. I usually did a fairly good job of calming them down by having a relatively stoic demeanor, not showing I didn't care, but listening to them, but not letting them get me upset myself. And in my personal life, through personal relationships, and then later through my writing. So I really can hardly think of an area in my life where the Stoics have not been a great boon to me.
Well, I've met some very lovely people. So because I was interested in Stoicism, I attended a Stoic camp that's led by Greg Lopez and Massimo Pigliucci. And then I went to Stoicon and met people like Greg Sadler and Don Robertson. And so the way Stoicism has improved my life, because the ideas were ideas I was familiar with with different language through my clinical training in REBT from Albert Ellis. But the people that I've met, I really like in the Stoic community. I think they have been really influential in helping me to learn about Stoicism, but just to help me come in contact with people that are inspiring, stimulating, exceptionally bright, committed to the well-being of the brotherhood of women and men. And so I would say the way Stoicism has improved my life, it's been a path to meeting some people I really like and love.